Architect Divya Chakravarti. She completed her undergraduate studies from SRM University and she went on to pursue her master's in historic preservation and urbanism and study of the built environment from the University of California, Los Angeles. She went on to work for the Department of Planning and Preservation for the city of Pasadena, California. She also did a brief stint of work for Historic Scotland, Edinburgh, UK. She also worked on conservation projects like Kalsa Mahal, Gokhale Hall in Chennai, and Marimalappa Educational Trust in Mysore. She is currently working as the Director of Samrakshan Heritage Consultancy. She is also a co-founder of the Artisan Reprisal of Traditional Materials, Method and Technology. She goes on to conduct workshops to revive traditional and lost methods of construction.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series for Bachelors of Architecture. The subject we are discussing is evolution of human settlements. The topic we are delving into is human settlements as political expression. The topics we will be discussing are contributions of Patrick Geddes and the contributions of C.A. Doxiadis, the two main urban planners of the later part of history. Contributions of Patrick Geddes. His main contribution was the Geddesian Triad. He was referred to as the father of modern town planning. He was the first one to link sociological concepts into town planning. Survey before plan, that is diagnosis before treatment. Before we decide to plan any town, we have to discuss and find out what are the problems that are currently existing in a town. It is only once we understand the problems that we can find a cure for those solutions. If you look at the important dates of Patrick Geddes, he was between 1854 and 1932. In 1886, he settled in the city of Edinburgh. In 1892, the Outlook Tower, world's first sociological observatory. In 1911, exhibition on cities and town planning. 1915, published Cities in Evolution. Then he visited India. 1920 to 23, Professor of Civics and Sociology in University of Mumbai. 1924, settled in Montpellier, France. So, Patrick Geddes has a lot of influence in the history of town planning because it was the first time there was a link of sociological relevance to that of town planning. This is the Geddesian Triad. Here you have folk organism, work, function, place, environment, organic relationship between social, physical and economical environment. Now, if you look at this, place, place of work, place of folk, workplace, work economics, anthropology. So, there is a sense of link between who we are, what is it that work we do and the place we live in. So, this is the main triad or the three components that we deal with. So, there is a sense, an experience and a feeling. So, these three and again place, work and folk, which is nothing but anthropology. So, his planning concepts were rural development, urban planning and city design are not the same and adopting a common planning process is disastrous. Conurbation, that is waves of population inflow to large cities, followed by overcrowding and slum formation, and then the wave of backflow. That is, the whole process is resulting in an amorphous sprawl, waste and unnecessary obsolescence. The sequence of planning is to be: first, regional survey; 2, rural development; 3, town planning; and finally, city design. These are to be kept constantly up to date. He gave his expert advice for the improvement of about 18 major towns in India. This is the Outlook Tower, which is very important. This actually took over Short's Observatory in 1892. Spectacular views in the surrounding city region. Positioned on top is the camera obscura, which reflects an image onto the white table within for study and survey. So, here you have the world, Europe, English speaking countries, Scotland, Edinburgh, then the circular white table, darkened room, the camera obscura, which is the lens and the mirror which both revolves. So, it actually gets images 360 degrees. Another concept he came about is the neighborhood unit. The neighborhood is a planning unit for a town. This evolved due to the advent of industrial revolution and degradation of city environment caused due to high congestion, heavy traffic movement through the city, insecurity to school going children, distant location of shopping and recreation activities, etc. So, you should see these are these cartoon images that you can see over here as a response to how a town was actually growing. People were growing at there was a lot of industries growing at one point of time, but man was not happy with that kind of growth because he was like, I am not able to grow, there is no kind of growth for me. Then you can see the over congestion by cars. Then there is this thing of sense of sprawl. I have to leave the city and travel so far to just go to the supermarket, and then you have to build a town to just support that. So, it is the neighborhood unit became a very important classification of what a city should be. It should have a number of such units which makes the social element of cities also acceptable. You have to create a safely healthy physical environment in which children will have no traffic, streets to cross, so they can go to school and without their parents dropping them off or picking them up. An environment in which women can have an easy walk to the shopping center, they can have access to daily household goods. Employed people may find convenient transportation to and from work. Well-equipped playground is located near the house where children may play safely with their friends, which ensures healthy development of not only their mind and spirit, but also their bodies. If you look at the principles of a neighborhood unit of urban planning, you need to have a unit of urban planning. There should be an adequate street system. You can see the street grid over here, an arterial street, a main highway, certain roads leading directly only to the community. Some of these are completely pedestrian, not allowing automobiles, and this is about a radius of 3/4 of a mile. So, this is considered a walking radius. Then you have certain facilities, population, sector. This is considered a sector size. What is the size and density of the sector? Neighborhood walkways. All of these are neighborhood walkways, and protective strips. Protective strips are buffer zones basically. Now we come on to the contributions of C.A. Doxiadis. His main concept was dimensions increase and will continue to increase for a few generations, and thus the most probable future in definable terms will mean a very large increase of population and energy in the city of Anthropos, which is nothing but man. This is the city where the whole mankind will live or tend to live. So, one thing that is constant is change. So, change will be there. There will be an increase in population, there will be an increase in size, there will be an increase in the supporting elements that is required to support the increase in population. So, that will never change, and eventually we have to come up with a design of a city which will support and help us live. So, if you look at the history of Doxiadis, he comes from a family that played a very important role in the settlement of the Greek war refugees in between two world wars. He was a chief town planning officer in the greater Athens area between 1937 and 38. He was the head Department of Regional and Town Planning, Ministry of Public Works, Greece. The major projects in the application of his theories of acoustics, C.A. Doxiadis studied, programmed, planned and designed in collaboration with his colleagues a great number of human settlements and other development projects. These projects cover several fields like rural settlements, agriculture, irrigation, industrial settlements, manufacturing, power and public works, commerce and tourism, transportation and communications, housing, urban renewal and development of new cities. So, we will discuss his theory of acoustics, which was his contribution towards planning. If you look at the acoustics framework, he positioned a convenient way of organizing information and mapping out the components and relationships of elements within the human settlements realm. He suggests to have a classificatory system, which will be a methodology to establish the hierarchical structure and links among elements of a system. Acoustics is the science of human settlements. This characteristic refers to functions expressed in space by area of certain dimensions. In practice, acoustics has the set of goal of human happiness. His two classificatory dimensions are: first dimension relative to scale. Lower end you have the individual, the room, the dwelling unit, and then the increases in size all the way into the other extreme, which is the city, the urban continent, and the worldwide city, which is nothing but the whole city that we come to know as the economopolis. The second dimension is man's 5 environmental elements. You have nature, society, shells, networks, and culture. The first principle is maximization of man's potential contacts with the elements of nature, such as water and trees, with other people and with the works of man, such as buildings and roads. The second principle is minimization of the effort required for the achievement of man's actual and potential contacts. The third principle is optimization of man's protective space, which means the selection of such a distance from other people, animals, or objects that he can keep his contacts with them, that is the first principle, without any kind of sensory or physiological discomfort. The fourth principle is optimization of the quality of man's relationship with his environment, which consists of nature, society, shells. Shells is nothing but buildings, houses of all sorts, and networks. Networks ranges from roads to telecommunications. This is the principle that leads to order, physiological and aesthetic, and that influences architecture and in many respects art as well. So, man cannot distinguish or clearly say that, okay, I will only do this, I do not need nature, I do not need society. These elements always have coexisted, and we should realize that these elements will tend to coexist, and we should not remove nature from us. We should make sure nature is a part of society. Our shells are in cohesion with the society we are living in. The networks that are around connecting our shells to the other parts of society are part of our culture and nature. So, it is this kind of realm that we need to create for ourselves, that is self-contained. If you look at this, you have nature, society, shells, and then you have networks, and then you have our main culture, that is man. What is it that we do? Man only defines culture. It is only because of that that we are able to have these interconnected elements. None of these elements exist by themselves. They have to have an interconnected relationship, and for us to have a sustainable well living in a city or a town, we have to make sure these 5 elements always go hand in hand. Finally, in the fifth principle, man organizes his settlements in an attempt to achieve an optimum synthesis of other 4 principles, and this optimization is dependent on time and space, on actual conditions, and on man's ability to create a synthesis. So, if you look at acoustics and other disciplines, in the first 5 volumes, it is interesting to note that out of 105 papers, 66 are in papers in economics, mainly regional economic analysis. 6 papers are on geography, 16 on regional science in general. Physical planning is represented by 6% and political aspects by 3%, sociology by 3%, and transportation by a meager 1.9%. It is quite clear where the center of gravity lies. Mainly it is only with economics. Acoustics and sciences directly contributing to it, you have maximum economics, cultural disciplines not so much, social sciences again not so much, but the main driving force is economics. Political sciences and administration, technical disciplines, but acoustics as such has to have a combination of all these 5 elements, all these 5 volumes, but it's completely driven by economics because that is the spine of any city or town planning. If we come to the analysis, to achieve this we must clarify what we mean by cities. If we have the wrong conception, for example, that all cities are going to be like city of London, densely built, small, traditional central part of urban areas, or like the city of New York, multi-million people agglomerations with many skyscrapers, we cannot go far. We should not have any preconceptions of what a city looks like. We have to only think of the components of the city which can exist in any form. In all the cases we will fail because cities of the future may not be like these prototypes, but because we approach our subject with preconceived ideas about number of people, physical size, buildings, styles in which these buildings are going to be built, these are a major hindrance to the conception of cities of the future. What is it that we are going to talk about in acoustics? Acoustics doesn't even talk about architecture. What kind of building is it? Population. What kind of a city are we looking at? What kind of economics is the city driven by? What kind of social life does that city want to have? We have to attack town planning from another direction completely and not base it on cities that have already been built and with problems in them. So, according to Doxiadis, the greatest problem facing cities is the problem of managing growth. He proposed several solutions to leave room for expansion of the city core. So, some of his proposals include limiting all buildings to 3 levels or less with permission to build higher, separating automobile and pedestrian traffic completely, constructing cities as a beehive of cells no bigger than 2 by 2 kilometers, the maximum comfortable distance for walking. So, it should be like a cluster of nodules. So, if suppose 100 nodules are not sufficient, these nodules could be made 150 or then 200. So, Doxiadis basically limited the number of roads on campus. All educational buildings are interconnected with people to walk from one to another. Courtyards provide places for people to discuss. So, let us remove the automobile element completely and make it pedestrian friendly. Now, if you look at this in development of human settlements, this is village and pre-urban era. Now, you can see the cities in beginning of urban, the spots, early dynamopolis where it is little more dynamic, it is moving and the dots are getting bigger. And here you can see the industrial area, a lot of larger black spots demarcating the growth of people as well as facilities. Then you have metropolis, which is how you see today, where you based on these industries, large towns emerge around these to support both the industries and vice versa. That is, people go from here, the urban areas, to the main cities, then they go back and forth. And currently what you see over here, the megalopolis, which is the large political units of countries, nodes, and it is more segregated. It is not like the industrial era where it is sprawl. Now it is even more contained and even more dense. Here you have economopolis, which is the settlement of the future, the dead city where nothing else can happen, and this is the city of life with the corrections in it. So, if you think of one of the major problems and the great confusion that is created by mixing two elements, man and machine, within the cities of the present. This confusion is what brings a conflict in most urban areas, which has not been resolved satisfactorily. And if it does get resolved, it is always in the favor of the machinery, only for major lines of transportation where man is a free agent and is completely separated from the machine, but has been confined within it in an element. Now, what are the other questions or rather arguments come from this? Are dimensions actually increasing? Is population growth a boon or a taboo to the society? Do we really need to have control measures to curtail this growth, or rather use our intellect, which puts us at par with animals and other life forms. Why then cities still live without succumbing to this devastating growth? So when you actually look at it, dimensions are increasing in a way, yes. Without our proper planning requirement, when man doesn't have place, he automatically goes to the closest open space that he can see. No committee has to come and decide and say, okay, this is going to become part of the city. It is only after a period of time when man has moved into these areas, does the committee get together and say, see, our people have moved to this area, let's make that area also a part of this city. Population growth can never be treated as a boon or a taboo because it's going to happen whether it is good or bad. It is not something that can be curtailed overnight. Control issues we can have in terms of growth such that it can be sustained development, sustained growth, and cities will continue to live however devastating the growth, because man is what makes the cities, and man will never give up easily and decide a city is going to die. He will try reviving it to the best possible. He will bring in, and as technological advances happen, he will bring in a lot of elements to support his life there, and it will not be a dead end, and he will not decide, okay, the city has reached saturation, let's move out. We have lived on earth for so many years, so many cities are hundreds of years old, but still even those cities are still thriving. People still live in them. People still go to them for commercial activities, for cultural activities and many such other relevant activities. If you look at the main lacking in any of these things is long-term planning is required. Then only we can decide what is it that we can look at. We have to have green field projects. We have to make sure that greenery is given a lot of importance. We have to make sure that it is a part of our culture. It's part of the way we grow. We cannot decide greenery is not required. We can just give a small lawn space. We are not talking about something that is done because of certain rules and regulations. We have to realize that it is a part of way of living. Today's chaos is mostly visible in cities like Delhi, Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Hyderabad. But serious chaos is probably there in other cities too, but we don't realize it. Our modern day cities can also be planned in such a manner that there is certain population and that is bylawed by different equal areas given to countryside, equal areas given to the city side. So we can have a combination of these different concepts that we have discussed about. There should be equitable land distribution between the city and the village such that agriculture is not treated as a bad profession, and then what is it that we are going to eat? Nothing. Cities can't thrive by themselves. Cities thrive because a very strong rural background is required. The rural background is the spine of any country or any city. Mega cities can be interconnected with highways, roadways and everything, but it should not be enforced such that these cities needn't have to always be interconnected and such that there has to be like a satellite town, there has to be a town that is connected to it. If a city is thriving by itself with both the elements of residence and commercial aspects, it can continue to thrive like that. And scale is very important. Yes, sometimes cities do grow, but it's only when we have a futuristic planning that we can decide how much is it that we can, a city can afford to grow. Now, if you can think of cities like Gurgaon, which lacks the basic social facilities, but without the infrastructure, they will start developing. Now, as the city has developed, infrastructure has continued to develop, and now Gurgaon is one of the best cities to live in and work in. Now, the argument is, how is it that we can go about doing it? Garden cities are created outside the built-up area to concentrate on complete green spaces. This is considered a bad place, but you can't obviously have two elements like that. No one is going to live in a completely rural area. No one wants to live in an overly congested, dark urban area. The center has to grow within the built-up area. So, first phase, yes. Second, dynamic phase, but the green core has to always be there. The dynamic city will otherwise get choked to death. So, in spite of this continuing surgery, the dynamic city cannot be relieved by these pressures. So, first you have the static city, the center is not sufficient, it grows, so then it has to be connected. So, how do you connect it? You open out highways. So, when you open out highways, the pressure on the center is relieved. Then you have cities continue to grow, more concentric circles get added, that is the city continues to expand, and the new pressure develops on the center, because as new city expands, the certain facilities are available only by the center, and it is this center that supports these continuing facilities. Then more new highways come about, and momentarily the pressure is relieved. But then this is a cyclic chain reaction. This will continue happening again and again. So we have to learn to decentralize. Now if you look at the acoustic principles, maximization of potential contacts, each individual's need for access to other people. Yes, that is a desirable outcome. Now if you look at this table over here, minimization of effort in terms of energy, time and cost. So people satisfy their needs without having to expand any time or unnecessary energy. Then you have optimization of anthropos protective space. That is, people live in a human scale neighborhood which is safe and secure. So you need, a man has to feel safe and secure for him to concentrate on his other physiological needs. Then quality of the anthropos relationship with the system of life. Levels of access to opportunities, that how far is he from work, how far is he from entertainment centers and cultural centers. Optimization in the synthesis of all these principles, human habitat exhibits a sensitive balance in the desirability outcomes where quality of life, social justice reinforce the desirability to achieve a sustainable environment. So here if you look at it again, human scale is re-established within the human community in Iraq. This is meant only for pedestrians in Pakistan. So you can see there is a community that does emerge. It's very important. We have to give importance to a neighborhood unit, but we have to realize what is it that as man that we require from the city. The city should respond to man's needs, and man shouldn't come to a position such that we change our needs such that we are able to adapt ourselves to the city. This Islamabad was completely the result of Doxiadis' principles of acoustics. You can see how the sketch has actually changed. It indicates a growth of functions in the direction of the city's future expansion. There was a special space given for future expansion. National park has been demarcated. Metropolitan area has been divided as 3 parts: landscape, patterns and highway. There is social planning, pedestrian and vehicular planning. To conclude, we come to a place such that Chandigarh, let it be Chandigarh or let it be Corbusier's theory, it's all a continuation of acoustics. In this way, we have come to a stage where natural human community can be immensely enlarged into a human city. We have to make sure with proper organization of transportation and telecommunication network, extra human scale of the large city can be turned into a human one, and the inhuman conditions now existing in many parts of the city can be eliminated. The fact that the frame is extra human does not mean that we cannot create a human scale within it. Man will have to create once more a human scale such that he can live and we can remove the inhuman parts. So decentralization is the main way to go. You need to have more centers, so the stress and pressure on one center will reduce. Economopolis, the unique city of man, will form a continuous differentiated, different cells, different cities can follow, such that we can avoid all problems of abnormal growth. Cities will always continue to live because of this. Man will always find a way to make sure the understanding, communicating, inventing, all of this will continue happening, but within his realm. At the end of this lecture, we have covered the contributions of Patrick Geddes and the contributions of C.A. Doxiadis, the two main urban planners of the later part of history, and at the end of this, we should be able to answer the following questions. Discuss the role of Patrick Geddes in the field of town planning. What is the Geddesian triad? What is the importance of the neighborhood unit? Discuss the contribution of C.A. Doxiadis in the field of city planning. How did Doxiadis influence the planning of Islamabad? What is acoustics? That brings us to the end of this lecture. Thank you.